My name is Rachel Mercer, and I am very good at math. I don't mean that as a brag. I mean it the way a plumber might say they're good with pipes. It's just the thing I do. The way I move through the world. Numbers make sense to me in a way that people historically have not. Numbers don't change their story depending on who's in the room. They don't smile at you on Sunday and slip an invoice under the door on Monday. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start on a Tuesday. Charlotte, North Carolina, November, 11:07 p.m., according to the clock on my laptop, and I have a habit of noticing exact times, which my coworkers find annoying and my clients find reassuring. My apartment was quiet. It usually was. 14th floor, corner unit, the kind of place where you could hear the city breathing below but couldn't make out any of its words. I liked that. I designed my entire life around that particular quality of silence, close enough to everything, insulated from most of it. I was sitting at my desk in the same button-down shirt I'd worn to the office, still tucked. I hadn't changed yet. I never changed until the work was actually done, and the work was almost never actually done. 2 windows open on my laptop, the left one, a client's Q4 audit which needed to be cleaned by Friday. The right one, a file I'd been maintaining for 11 months that had nothing to do with any client. I scrolled through the right window the way you might check a plant you've been keeping alive without fully knowing why. Added a number in column F, row 34. Adjusted the formula. The total in the bottom cell shifted by a few $1,000s. I looked at it for exactly 4 seconds. Then I switched back to the audit. The file had a name. I kept it nested inside 3 folders with boring labels: administration, MISC, archive, because I lived alone and had no reason to hide things from anyone, and yet I kept it buried anyway. The way you keep certain things in the back of the drawer, not because you're hiding them, but because you're not ready to look at them every day. The file was named The Ledger. I'll tell you what was in it, but not yet. The next morning I was at my desk by 8. Priya was already there. Priya Desai, 34. The only person at Hutchinson and Moore who drank her coffee black and got genuinely emotional about tax code. She and I had been colleagues for 6 years, which in accounting years is something like a marriage. She was telling me about Thanksgiving, specifically about a conversation she'd had with her brother over the phone that had apparently ended with someone hanging up, someone else crying, and a disputed $3,000 that had been lent or gifted, depending on who you asked, 3 Christmases ago. The thing is, Priya said, leaning against the doorframe of my office, you can't put a number on family, Rachel. You just can't. The second you start counting, you've already lost. I was looking at the Heller account on my screen. I said. Like, yes, technically he borrowed it, but it's family. You don't go after family for money. What if family goes after you? Priya frowned. That's different. How? She opened her mouth, closed it. This was something that happened to people when I asked questions I already knew the answer to. They had the instinct of a response without the architecture to support it. It just is, she said finally. Blood is thicker than water. I took a sip of coffee, said nothing. In the elevator on the way out that evening, I thought about what Priya said. I thought about it the way I think about most things, not emotionally but architecturally, turning it over until I could see where the load-bearing walls were. Blood is thicker than water. Fine. But blood is also harder to clean up. And Priya was wrong about one thing. You can put a number on family. Families do it all the time. They do it with inheritance, with who gets the house, with who paid for the wedding, and who didn't show up. They do it with every I gave you everything and every after all I've done for you. The only question is who controls the accounting. I pressed the lobby button, watched the numbers count down. The Sunday call with my parents ran 12 minutes. It always ran 12 minutes. Not because I timed it well, not only because I timed it, but because we had developed, over many years without ever discussing it, a precise and functional rhythm. My mother spoke. My father existed in the background. I asked questions designed to generate 2 to 3 sentence answers. We covered the weather in Asheville, the progress of my father's woodworking project in the garage, a television program my mother was following that I had never watched and didn't intend to. My mother was Barbara Mercer, 61, West Asheville, born and raised. A woman who had perfected the art of saying things that sounded like warmth and functioned like inventory. She knew the name of every family in a 4-block radius. She brought casseroles to people who were sick and arranged prayer chains for people who were struggling and had, for as long as I could remember, maintained a reputation in her community as a woman who gave, who was generous and present and self-sacrificing in the way that some women are, the way that becomes its own kind of power. I knew the other side of that arithmetic. I'd been living in it since I was 8 years old. "When are you coming home?" she asked. She asked this every week. "I'll try for the holidays," I said. I said this most weeks. "Your Aunt Gloria's daughter comes back every month. She just got a promotion and she still makes the drive." My father said something in the background. I couldn't make out the words. I never could. "That's good to hear," I said, to both of them, covering all bases. "I just worry," my mother said. "You're so far." "I'm 2 hours, Mom." 2 hours is 2 hours, Rachel. There it was, the sentence she had been using since I was 22. 2 hours is 2 hours. The specific logic of it had never been clear to me. 2 hours was also not very far, but I'd learned not to argue the geometry. "I'll let you know about the holidays," I said. We wrapped up. I set the phone face down on the counter and stood in my kitchen for a moment, looking at the city through the window. The light was doing something specific to the buildings across the way, that late afternoon November thing where everything goes pewter and still, like the city had taken a breath and was holding it. I went back to my desk, opened the audit, opened the ledger, looked at the number in the bottom cell, saved the file, closed the window, got back to work. The email arrived on a Wednesday at 2:14 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I was in the middle of reviewing the Heller account column G, row 47, a depreciation figure that had been bothering me for a week, and my phone lit up on the desk beside me. I have a rule about my phone during audit hours. I don't look at it. I looked at it. The sender was my mother's address. The subject line said, "Important family matter." My mother had never sent me an email with a subject line before. My mother sent emails the way she left voicemails, long, rambling, starting 3 sentences before the actual point and ending 2 sentences after it. A subject line meant someone had helped her, or she'd looked it up. Either way, it meant she'd prepared. I set my phone back down, finished the row I was on, then I opened the email on my laptop where I could read it on a real screen. The body of the email was 3 sentences. "Rachel, please review the attached document at your earliest convenience. Your father and I have given this a great deal of thought. We believe this is fair." The attachment was a Word document. The file name was Invoice Rachel Mercer DocX, which told me everything about who had helped her format it, because my mother didn't know how to name files. She named everything Document 1 or New Microsoft Word Document 2. I opened it. 1 page. Times New Roman, 12 point. Centered at the top. Invoice for parental services rendered. Below that, my full name. Below that, the years. 1991, 2014. Below that, a short paragraph that my mother had almost certainly written herself because it had her rhythm, the slightly breathless cadence of a woman who had been rehearsing a speech for a long time and was finally giving it. "We raised you. We fed you. We clothed you and sheltered you and sacrificed our own dreams and opportunities so that you could have yours. We did this without complaint and without expectation of reimbursement. We are asking now because we feel it is time and because we believe it is right." At the bottom, bold, total due, $15,000. I read it once, then twice. The third time I read it slowly, the way I read contracts, looking for what wasn't there, not just what was. What wasn't there? Any specific accounting. No line items, no methodology, no citation for how $15,000 had been arrived at. Just the number, sitting there like a verdict that hadn't been argued. I put my phone in my desk drawer, closed the email, went back to column G, row 47, and finished the Heller account. When I got home that evening, I made dinner. I washed the dishes. I sat down at my desk. Then I opened the ledger. I hadn't looked at it in 3 days. The number in the bottom cell was $2,344,000 and some change. I scrolled slowly through the rows, not reviewing, just looking, the way you look at something you've built over a long time before you decide what to do with it. Then I opened a new tab and started working. I want to tell you about the summer I was 19, because it matters here. It was the first summer after my first year of college, Appalachian State, 2 hours from home, which my mother had made clear was already too far. I had a part-time job at a grocery store, 40 hours a week through June and July, and at the end of those 2 months I had saved $900, which felt like a fortune. My mother called me in August. Not to ask how I was doing, she never started there. She started with the information she wanted me to have, and then moved to the request that had always been the point. The washing machine had broken. The repair was $400. My father's truck needed new brakes. Another $250. She'd had a bad month at the salon. She worked the front desk, not the chairs, which meant her hours got cut when things were slow. I hate to ask, she said, in the tone of someone who did not hate to ask. I sent her $400. Not the whole $900. I kept enough to cover my fall textbooks and my half of the shared apartment deposit. $400 felt like the right number. Enough to help. Enough to keep, my mother said. It's about time. Not thank you. Not I appreciate it. Not I know you worked hard for this. It's about time. I stood in the kitchen of my shared apartment in Boone, 20 years old. This was the following year, when I'd gotten better at the math, and I thought, I should have kept a receipt. I didn't know then that I'd eventually start doing exactly that. I began keeping records the summer I was 22, the summer after I graduated and took the job at Hutchinson and Moore and moved to Charlotte. Not because I had a plan. Not because I imagined some future confrontation. I started because I needed to understand what had actually happened, the full accounting of it, in the same way that, when the numbers in an audit don't make sense, you don't look away. You build the picture from scratch. So I did. Month by month. Year by year. Everything I had contributed, with citations, government data for labor rates, inflation adjustments, academic sources for opportunity cost calculations. I worked on it the way I worked on everything, methodically, without emotional commentary, one column at a time. I kept it in a folder, buried 3 levels deep. I gave it a name that meant something only to me. By the time my mother's email arrived on that Wednesday in November, the file was 11 months old and 47 pages long. The number in the bottom cell was $2,344,000, which I rounded up to $2,347,000 after I added one final adjustment that evening. A line for the summer I was 14, the one I don't talk about yet. I closed the laptop at 11, set my alarm for 6, sent Priya a text. Can you cover my Monday morning client? I need a long weekend, she replied in 4 minutes. Everything okay? I typed back. Better than okay. I need to go see my parents. Which was true, just not in the way Priya would have assumed. I opened my email, clicked reply to my mother's message, typed 9 words. Dear Mom and Dad, I'll be home Saturday. R. Hit send. Then I went to bed. I had a lot to do before Saturday, and I have always slept best when I have a plan. I wrote the check Thursday morning. $15,000, made out to Barbara and Dennis Mercer, signed with my full legal signature, not the shorthand I used for office memos, the real one, the one I used on tax filings and lease agreements. I wrote the memo line, invoice dated November 4th, paid in full. I put it in an envelope. I drove to the post office before work and sent it certified mail, which costs a few dollars more and requires the recipient to sign for it. I did not need them to sign for it. I just wanted the documentation. Back in the car, I sat for a moment with the engine running. $15,000. I had that in my checking account, not my savings, my checking account, where I kept money I expected to spend on ordinary things. That was not nothing. That was also, given what I was planning, not the point. I drove to work. got coffee, opened my laptop, searched. Can a child legally invoice parents for unpaid labor? Read 4 results. Closed the tab, searched. Market rate childcare Western North Carolina 2000 to 2014 by year. Read 2 results. Opened a government database, copied 3 figures into a spreadsheet. Closed the tab, searched. BLS Domestic Services Wage Data Inflation Adjusted 2023. Downloaded a PDF. Highlighted 4 rows. Closed the PDF. This took 11 minutes. I had been doing this, in pieces, for 11 months. What was left now was assembly taking what I had built in separate columns and making it into something a person could read in one sitting and not be able to argue with. That was the specific skill I'd spent a decade developing at Hutchinson and Moore, and I was going to use it for the first time on something that actually mattered to me. I worked through lunch. I worked after the office emptied out. By 9 that evening, the document was 47 pages, which I knew was long, but every page was necessary, and I had never in my professional life submitted a document with unnecessary pages. Let me tell you what was in it. Page 1. A cover sheet. My name, my parents' names, their address on Westwood Drive in Asheville. The total, the methodology statement, 3 sentences, which explained that all figures were derived from Bureau of Labor Statistics data, adjusted for regional cost of living and annual inflation, and cited accordingly. Page 3. Household Maintenance Services, years 1999 through 2007. That was 8 years of cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and general upkeep. Beginning at age 8, the year my mother started what she called teaching me responsibility, and what I had come to understand was something else entirely. I used the North Carolina Domestic Services Wage Average for each year, adjusted for inflation. I did not round up. I did not add a premium for the fact that I was 8 years old and had not been given a choice. The number was $31,400. Page 7. Childcare Services, rendered to Daniel Mercer, my younger brother, years 2001 through 2009. 4 evenings per week, on the days my mother worked and my father was at the shop. I was 9 years old when this started. The rate I used was the Asheville childcare market average, lower than Charlotte, lower than Raleigh, the most conservative number I could justify. The number was $48,720. I want to be clear about something. I did not resent my brother. Daniel was 7 years younger than me, and the things I did for him, the dinners, the homework help, the years of putting him to bed, while my parents watched television, those were things I had chosen to do because I loved him. I still do. That was not what the invoice was about. The invoice was about the fact that my parents had taken that love and built a household economy around it without ever asking if I was willing. Page 29. Opportunity cost. Academic. 1 line. Soma tutusine. A6. UNC Chapel Hill Summer Scholars Program in Mathematics and Science. Merit Scholarship. Full tuition. Declined at parental request. Estimated opportunity value in today's terms, compounded, $94,000. I had gone back and forth on whether to include that line for 3 months. Not because I wasn't sure of the number was correct. I had checked it 6 times, but because putting it in the document meant I was going to have to sit across from my mother and watch her read it. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I included it anyway. Some things need to be said in writing, where they can't be talked over or redirected or quietly set aside like they never happened. Page 47 was the last page. Summary and terms. The total $2,347,000 and a single paragraph that I had rewritten 11 times over the course of 11 months. This invoice is not a legal demand. It is a record. A full accounting of what was given, what was taken, and what was never acknowledged. I am not asking for payment. I am asking for something that cannot be invoiced and has not been forthcoming. The recognition that these things occurred, that they had value, and that the person who provided them deserved better than silence. I read it one more time, changed one word, read it again, left it. Then I opened my email and wrote a short message to my Aunt Gloria. Gloria Tanner, 57, my mother's younger sister, the person my mother had always held up to me as the example of what family loyalty looked like. Gloria calls every week. Gloria came for Christmas. Gloria never misses a birthday. What my mother had perhaps not fully considered was that Gloria had also, over the years, been the one person in the family who called me directly, who asked me real questions, who once told me at a 4th of July barbecue that she thought I was the smartest person in the family and she hoped I knew it. I thought she deserved to know what was coming. Aunt Gloria, I'm visiting Mom and Dad on Saturday. I wanted you to have some context before the weekend. Attached is a document I'll be discussing with them. You don't need to do anything with this. I just thought you should know. I attached the file. Hit send. Closed the laptop. It was 10:43. I made a cup of tea I didn't drink. Stood at the window looking at the city. Saturday was 2 days away. I had done everything I could do from here. The rest was going to happen in a kitchen in Asheville at a table I had sat at my entire life, across from two people who had sent their daughter a bill for her own childhood. I had sent them a check. Now I was going to send them the math. I went to bed. I left Charlotte at 7:15 on Saturday morning. The drive from Charlotte to Asheville is 2 hours on a clear day straight west on I-26. Through the Piedmont and up into the mountains, the road gradually gaining elevation until the trees change character and the air coming through the vents turns sharper, more serious somehow, like it has better things to do than be pleasant. I drove with the radio off. I do this sometimes when I need to think, and I needed to think, but the thinking didn't come the way it usually did in organized sequences, one premise following the next. Instead, it came sideways, in pictures, in things I hadn't let myself look at directly in a long time. The first thing that came was the letter. I was 14, the summer of 2006. I had taken the SAT prep course at school because it was free, and because even then I understood that numbers were my way out, and my score had gotten me noticed by a summer program at UNC Chapel Hill, the Summer Scholars Program, 6 weeks of advanced mathematics and science, full scholarship, room and board included. The letter came to the house on a Thursday. I pulled it from the mailbox myself, which felt significant, like the universe had timed it so no one could intercept it. I ran inside. My mother was in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. I handed her the letter, stood there while she read it, watched her face do the thing it did when she was calculating, which was go very still and very quiet, the opposite of how it looked when she was happy. She set the letter on the counter. "Who's going to help with Daniel while I work?" she said. "The program is 6 weeks. 6 weeks is 6 weeks, Rachel." I looked at my father. He was at the kitchen table with the newspaper open in front of him. He was reading, or appearing to read. I had learned by then that the newspaper was something he held in front of himself the way other people held silence, as a way of not being in the room while technically being in it. He didn't look up. I called the program the next afternoon and told them I wasn't able to attend. The woman on the phone said the scholarship didn't come around twice. I said I understood. I hung up and went and sat on the back porch steps and looked at the yard for a while. Our yard in Asheville, the one with the old magnolia in the corner that dropped its leaves in a way that always seemed vaguely disgusted. And I felt something I didn't have a name for at 14 and still struggle to name now. Not grief, exactly. More like watching a door close from the wrong side and understanding, for the first time, that you were always going to be on this side of it. No one mentioned the letter again. Not that week, not that year. It just disappeared. The way things did in our house, when acknowledging them would have required someone to feel bad about something. I came back to the highway. Blinker. Lane change. The mountains in the distance, blue and layered, the way they always look from this far out. The second thing that came was the phone call from when I was 22. I had just accepted the job at Hutchinson and Moore. It was a good offer, entry level, but the firm had a real trajectory, and Charlotte felt far enough from Asheville to breathe and close enough that I could still pretend, when necessary, that the distance was geographical and not something else. I called my mother to tell her. Charlotte is far, she said. It's 2 hours. 2 hours is 2 hours. A pause. Your cousin Melissa stayed. She's doing very well. I know, Mom. I just don't know what we're going to do without you. Your father's back has been bad. Daniel still needs help with his applications. I'm not saying don't go. I'm just saying I don't know how we're going to manage. I said I understood. I said I would help however I could. I said it because I meant it. I did want to help. And I said it because there was a version of me at 22 who still believed that enough help delivered consistently and without complaint would eventually add up to something, would eventually be enough. It was not enough. I don't think it was ever meant to be enough. I think what my mother wanted was not the help, but the proximity, not the assistance, but the arrangement, the specific configuration of our family in which I was present and useful and available, the same configuration that had existed since I was 9 years old, and which I had disrupted by graduating and taking a job and moving to a city 2 hours away. I sent money instead, every month for 10 years. Not because she asked, not exactly she had a way of not asking that somehow functioned as asking, a way of describing a problem in enough detail that the solution became obvious, and the only question was whether you were the kind of person who provided it. I was, for a long time, that kind of person. I took the Black Mountain exit because I needed gas, and also because I had 20 minutes before I had to be at my parents' house and I wasn't ready yet. I pulled into the parking lot of a Walmart off the highway, parked, turned off the engine. The lot was half full on a Saturday morning, people loading groceries, a man returning a cart with the careful deliberateness of someone who had nothing else to do. The mountains were visible from here, the real mountains now, not the blue suggestion of them from the highway. I sat for a moment. There is a question I don't ask myself often because I don't find the exercise productive. Why? Not what or how, those I can answer. But why? Why are you doing this, Rachel? What is it actually for? I was doing this for the 47 pages in the folder on my back seat. I was doing this because my mother had sent a Word document to my work email with the subject line "Important Family Matter" and a total of $15,000. And the phrase "We believe this is fair," and I had spent 11 months building a response, and I was 2 hours from Asheville with a certified mail tracking number and a pre-sent email to Gloria, and no reason left not to go. But I was also doing this for something the 47 pages didn't cover. Something I'd put in the last paragraph but wasn't sure I'd said correctly. The recognition that these things occurred, that they had value, that the person who provided them deserved better than silence. That was the part that didn't have a number. That was the part I hadn't figured out how to invoice. I sat in that parking lot for 3 minutes, which I know because I watched the clock. Then I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. Asheville was 15 minutes west. The mountains got taller as I drove toward them, the way they always did, slowly, incrementally, and then all at once. I turned the radio on. A song I didn't know. I left it playing. The house on Westwood Drive looked exactly the way it always looked. That was the thing about my parents' house, it was immune to time in the way that certain places are. The ones where nothing is ever quite updated but nothing is ever quite allowed to deteriorate either. The same green shutters. The same porch railing my father had repainted 3 times in my memory. Always the same shade of white. The magnolia in the side yard, larger than it used to be, which was the only evidence that years had actually passed. My mother was standing at the door when I pulled into the driveway. She was wearing the blue apron, the one with the rooster pattern that she wore when she cooked, and also, I had noticed over the years, when she was expecting to be observed cooking. It was a performance apron. She had others for actual work. My father stood slightly behind her, hands in his pockets. She came down the porch steps and hugged me before I had fully closed the car door. Her hugs were the same as always, firm, brief, with a quality of assessment to them, like she was checking inventory while appearing to offer comfort. "You look tired," she said, holding me at arm's length. "Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom." "You're thin." "You were always thin, but you look thinner." "I eat fine." "I made the pot roast." "You need protein." She was already moving toward the door. Dennis, take her bag. I've got it, I said. My father looked at me for a moment before he looked away. He had a way of looking that was different from my mother's, where she looked to catalog. He looked as if he was trying to remember something he'd forgotten and wasn't sure he'd ever known. He held the door open. I went inside. The check arrived, my mother said from the kitchen. Thank you, Rachel. I knew you'd understand eventually. I set my bag by the stairs. Let's eat first. The table was set the way it always was when I came home, the good placemats. The ones with the embroidered edges she'd gotten at a church sale 15 years ago, the glasses that were one step nicer than the everyday ones. My mother cooked well. She always had. This was one of the true things I held on to, the ones that didn't require revision. She was a good cook, she kept a clean house, she was present in the way that required physical labor, and she had confused that presence for the whole of what a mother was supposed to be. She talked through dinner. The Hendersons next door had gotten a new dog. The price of groceries was unreasonable. Pastor Mike had announced a building fund campaign, and she wasn't sure the timing was right, but what could you say? Her friend Patrice had been having a hard time lately, something with her son. My father ate. I asked questions in the right places. I ate the pot roast, which was good, and said so, and my mother accepted the compliment the way she accepted most things as confirmation of something she'd already known. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, a text, and a small frown moved across her face before she set it back down. She kept eating. Gloria's daughter is expecting again, she said. Did I tell you? Third one. They're very happy. That's wonderful, I said. Gloria is thrilled. She gets to see them every week, the grandchildren. I keep telling your father someday. She looked at me. Someday. I understood what someday meant in this context. I had always understood it. I smiled and said nothing and finished my pot roast. After dinner, my father carried the plates to the kitchen. I heard the water running, the familiar sound of him rinsing dishes the way he'd rinsed dishes my entire life, thoroughly, methodically, spending more time on it than necessary, which I had come to recognize as one of the ways he absented himself from difficult rooms without technically leaving. My mother poured herself a cup of tea, sat back down at the table. The apron was still on. I'm glad we could do this, she said. I know you've been busy. I know Charlotte keeps you busy. But family has to come first, Rachel. It just does. I agree, I said. She looked pleased. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I feel like we can move forward now. Get past all this. The check it was the right thing. It showed maturity. I thought so too. And I want you to know I don't hold anything against you. The distance, the calls being short sometimes. Everyone goes through a selfish phase. It's normal. I let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then I reached into my bag. The folder was manila, letter size, unremarkable. I had printed the document at the office on Friday, on the firm's good paper heavier than standard, the kind that costs more per ream and holds its shape. 47 pages, hole punched, held together with a binder clip rather than stapled, because I needed her to be able to turn the pages. I set it on the table, pushed it across to her, not aggressively. The way you hand someone a document in a meeting. I brought something too, I said. My mother looked at the folder. She looked at me. She looked at the folder again, and I could see her deciding how to receive this as a joke, as a gesture, as something she could absorb and redirect. She picked it up, opened the cover. She read the top line, the total. She laughed. It was a short laugh, surprised out of her, the kind that means the person hasn't caught up yet to what they're looking at. Rachel, what is this? It's an invoice, I said. Page 3 has the methodology. Page 7 has the childcare figures. Page 29 has the opportunity cost section. Opportunity cost. She said the phrase the way you repeat a foreign word carefully, like it might mean something different in a language you don't speak. The summer program. 2006. The laugh was gone. She turned to page 7. I watched her read the childcare line. $48,720. She looked up. That's not real, she said. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data is cited in footnote 14. You can verify it. The childcare rates I used are actually below the Asheville average for those years I used the lower bound. You cannot charge your parents for babysitting your brother. I was 9, I said. I wasn't babysitting. I was parenting. There's a market rate for that. She put the folder down. She looked at me the way she sometimes had when I was a child, and had said something that required her to recalibrate an expression that moved through surprise, and then something that was almost respect before it hardened into resistance. She stopped. This is hurtful, Rachel. After everything we did for you. Page 3 addresses that, I said. The invoice covers services rendered from age 8 to 23. Your invoice covered birth to 23. I'm giving you the first 8 years at no charge. From the kitchen, the water stopped running. My father appeared in the doorway. He looked at the folder on the table. He looked at his wife's face. He looked at me. He didn't go back into the kitchen. He pulled out his chair and sat down. "What's going on?" he said. My mother looked at me. I looked at him. "Dad," I said, "I need you both to read page 29. My father reached for the folder. My mother pulled it back. Not forcefully, just a small repositioning. The way you keep something on your side of the table without making it a confrontation. She turned to page 29 herself. I watched her read. The page was sparse. One section header. One paragraph, one line item. I had written it that way deliberately. Everything else in the document was dense, with data, citations, footnotes. Page 29 had room to breathe because I needed her to have nowhere to go but the words. She read it. I could tell when she reached the line about the summer program because her chin moved just slightly, the way it did when she was processing something she didn't want to process. That was a long time ago, she said. 14 years. You were a child. Children don't always get what they want. That's parenting. I was 14. The program was 6 weeks. Daniel was 7 years old and perfectly capable of spending 6 weeks in after-school care like the other children in his class. We couldn't afford after-school care. Then, I could have helped pay for it. I had a part-time job. I was already helping. She set the folder down. Her voice shifted, not louder but tighter, like something being turned up a notch on a dial. You want to talk about what you helped with? Fine, let's talk about it. Who drove you to school for 10 years? Who sat up with you when you had that terrible flu at 15? Who made sure you had a dress for prom, Rachel? A dress we couldn't really afford. Because you wanted to go and I wanted you to have that? Page 15, I said. Transportation, medical care, clothing, and school expenses. All of it is in there. All of it is calculated. And I want you to notice that I did not charge for those things because those are things parents are supposed to provide, and I would never put a price on them. She stared at me. What I charged for, I said, is the labor, the domestic work, the child care, the years of monthly transfers. The scholarship I didn't take. Those are different. Those were not parenting. Those were transactions. And you understood them as transactions the moment you sent me a Word document with a total at the bottom. Silence. My father was reading page 29. I could see his eyes moving. "Barbara," he said quietly, "it was a full scholarship. Dennis, stay out of this." "I'm not staying out of it." "She had a full scholarship." He looked up from the page. Not at my mother, at me. I didn't know that. I remember the letter, but I didn't know it was a full scholarship. "You were sitting at the table," I said. "The same table." He looked back down at the paper. "I know." My mother stood up. Not dramatically, she just stood. The way people do when they need to put space between themselves and something they don't know what to do with. She walked to the counter. Her back was to me. "I did the best I could," she said. "I was working. Your father was working. We had 2 children and 1 income, and I made decisions I thought were right. I am not going to sit in my own kitchen and be put on trial for trying to hold this family together." "I'm not putting you on trial," I said. "The document isn't a lawsuit, it's a record. You asked me to pay. I paid. I brought the rest of the record so you could see the full picture." Her phone was on the counter in front of her. It lit up. She looked at it. Her body went still in a specific way, Not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of someone who has just understood something. She picked it up. Read. Set it down. Picked it up again. Read again. I knew what it was. I had sent Gloria the document Thursday night, and Gloria had had 36 hours with it. And I had not asked her to do anything with it. I had said, very clearly, that she didn't need to do anything, but Gloria was a person who had strong feelings about fairness and had spent 30 years watching her sister manage her family the way a foreman manages a work site, and I had perhaps not been surprised when no reply to my email had come, because some people respond to information with words, and some people respond with action. What I had not fully anticipated was the prayer circle. Who did she send this to? My mother said. Not a question. Her voice had changed entirely, gone flat and low. The voice underneath the voice. The one she used when she was no longer performing anything. I don't know who she sent it to, I said. I sent it to Gloria. What she did with it is her decision. Patrice Henderson. She said the name the way you say the name of a wound. She sent it to Patrice Henderson. Patrice Henderson, who my mother had mentioned at dinner, her friend having a hard time, something with her son. Patrice Henderson, who had been in the same prayer circle as my mother for 11 years. Patrice Henderson, who would see everyone from that circle at church tomorrow morning. My mother turned around. Her face was different. I had seen my mother angry before at my father, at neighbors, at slow drivers, at politicians she disagreed with on television. I had never seen this. This was not anger. This was the specific expression of someone watching the architecture of something they built very carefully begin to come apart in a way they cannot stop. Do you understand what you've done? She said. I understand what you did, I said. And I wanted there to be a record. These are people I see every week. These are people who know our family. These are... She stopped. Her hands were on the counter behind her. How could you do this to me? Mom. I kept my voice even. You sent me a bill. That was private. Between family. So is 23 years of unpaid labor. So is a summer scholarship that went uncollected because I was asked to stay home and watch my brother. Those things were also private. You made ours a financial transaction. I finished the accounting. She was gripping the counter. Her hands were shaking. Not dramatically, not the movie version of shaking hands, where everything trembles and the emotion is legible from across a room. The real version, small, tight, contained, the way strong feeling moves through a person who has spent their whole life keeping strong feeling controlled. Her knuckles were white against the edge of the counter. I looked at my mother's hands. At 61 years old, standing in the kitchen she had maintained for 30 years, wearing the apron with the rooster pattern, having told her daughter she had shown maturity by paying the bill, having just learned that her church community now had access to 47 pages of counter evidence. Her hands would not stop shaking. There are moments you prepare for and moments you don't. I had prepared for her anger. I had prepared for denial, for redirection, for the specific arguments she would make, each of which I had documented responses to in the appendix at the back of the folder. I had not prepared for her hands to look like that. I had not prepared for the thing that moved through me when I saw them not triumph. Not exactly. Something more complicated. The acknowledgement that even a reckoning has a cost, and sometimes the cost arrives in the body before the mind has processed it. I did not look away. My father closed the folder. He set it on the table carefully flat, the way he set down tools in his workshop when he was finished with them and wanted them to be findable later. I need more coffee, he said. He stood up, went to the kitchen. My mother did not move. He stood beside her at the counter, poured his coffee, and then he did something I had not seen him do in longer than I could calculate. He put his hand on her shoulder. Not to comfort her, to acknowledge that she was standing there. A different thing. He took his coffee, he came back to the table, he sat down. He looked at me. Keep going, he said. My mother turned around. She looked at my father the way you look at someone who has just said something in a language you didn't know they spoke. He was sitting at the table with his coffee, watching me, and his face had the quality I'd seen in it sometimes when I was very young, before I learned to stop looking for it, the quality of a person who has something to say and is deciding whether the cost of saying it is one he can afford. Apparently, he had decided. "Keep going," he said again, to me. "Tell us." "Dennis." "Barbara." He said her name quietly. Just the name. She stopped. I had prepared for a lot of things. I had not prepared for my father to be the one to create the silence. I looked at him. He was 63, heavier than he'd been when I was a child, with the particular posture of a man who had spent 40 years working with his hands and another 10 trying to rest them. He had a small scar on his chin from a table saw accident when I was 11. I had forgotten about that scar. Looking at him now across the kitchen table in Asheville, I remembered it. "The summer program," he said. "Tell me what you remember." "Dad, you don't have to I was sitting at the table," he said. "I know I was sitting at the table. I've thought about it." He paused. "I've thought about it more than once over the years. Just tell me what you remember." So I told him. The letter. The Thursday afternoon. Running inside because I was 14 and I still ran when I had good news. My mother reading it at the counter. The stillness on her face. The question about Daniel and who would watch him. My father at the table with the newspaper. The phone call I made the next day to the woman at UNC who said the scholarship didn't come around twice. I told it without drama. I didn't need drama. The facts were enough. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet. My mother was standing at the counter still, but her hands were at her sides now. The shaking had stopped, or she had stopped letting it show, I couldn't tell which. My father looked down at his coffee. "I heard her say no," he said. "I was right there, and I heard her say no, and He stopped. Turned the mug in his hands. I didn't say anything. I told myself you'd be fine, that there'd be other opportunities, that it was one summer. He looked up. Not at my mother. At me. I've been telling myself that for 18 years. "Dennis," my mother said. Her voice had changed. It was smaller now. "She had a full scholarship, Barbara. 14 years old. A full scholarship." He set the mug down. I should have said something. That day, and a lot of days after it. I didn't. And I'm not going to sit here and tell Rachel that wasn't a failure on my part. It was. My mother said nothing. I had 15 things I could have said. I had rehearsed them, in the way that I rehearse things not out loud, but in the careful interior space where I run projections. I could have told him that 18 years was a long time to wait. I could have read him the line from page 29 about compound career value. I could have pointed out that one sentence from him on that Thursday afternoon would have cost him nothing and given me everything. I said none of it. "Thank you, Dad," I said. He nodded. He looked older than he had at dinner. Or maybe he looked the right age. Maybe this was what 63 looked like without the newspaper held up in front of it. My mother sat back down at the table. Slowly, like someone who has been standing for a long time and has finally accepted that the standing isn't helping. She pulled the folder toward her and sat with her hands flat on top of it. "What do you want from us?" she said. It wasn't quite a question. It wasn't quite a surrender. It was something in between the voice of a person trying to locate the terms of a situation they had not expected to find themselves in. "I'm not going to pursue this legally," I said. "The document isn't a lawsuit. I'm not planning to share it publicly. Gloria made her own choice about what to do with the copy I sent her, and I can't control that, but I'm not going to make it a campaign." Then what? I had thought about how to say this. I had thought about it on the drive up, in the parking lot in Black Mountain, in the months before that when I was building the document and asking myself what it was actually for. I had written several versions of this paragraph in my head. None of them were quite right. "No more monthly calls I don't want to have," I said. "No more guilt when I don't come home for holidays. No more conversations where Aunt Gloria's daughter is the implicit standard I'm failing to meet." My mother opened her mouth. "I'm not finished," I said. "No more money. Not because I can't afford it. Because it was never about the money, not on my end. Every time I sent a transfer, I was trying to buy something that wasn't for sale, and I'm done doing that." "What were you trying to buy?" she said. I looked at her. She was 61 years old. She had the same eyes I had. People had said that my entire life. You have your mother's eyes, and for once I didn't find that observation as uncomfortable as I usually did. Being seen, I said, that's all. That's what the whole 47 pages is. Not a bill. A record of someone who was there, who worked, who gave things up, who sent money home every month for 10 years, and who was never once told, not once, that any of it was noticed, let alone appreciated. The kitchen was very quiet. My mother looked at the folder under her hands, the rooster apron, the table she had set with the good placemats. I noticed, she said. I know you did, I said. I know you noticed in the way you notice things by cataloging them, by using them as evidence in arguments, by bringing them up when you needed leverage. That's not the same as being seen. She didn't argue. I don't think she had an argument. I think she knew the difference between those two things, had always known it, and had chosen not to look at it directly because looking at it would have required her to change something, and she was 61 years old, and change had never come easily to her and probably never would. That was not a crime. It was also not something I was willing to keep accommodating. I stood up. I picked up my bag from by the stairs. I left the folder on the table. I'm not cutting you off, I said. I'm not disappearing. If something happens, if one of you is sick, if there's an emergency, call me and I'll be here. I mean that. I looked at my father. I mean it. He looked back at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I looked at my mother. She was still sitting at the table with her hands on the folder, and she looked, for the first time in my memory, like someone who did not know what to do next, not performing confusion, actually uncertain. It was the most honest I had seen her look in 32 years. I hope things get easier for you, Mom, I said. I genuinely do. She looked up. I could see her preparing something, a response, a rebuttal, a way to pull the conversation back toward territory she recognized. Then she stopped. Whatever she'd been preparing, she let it go. She said nothing. My father walked me to the door. He held it open, the same way he had when I'd arrived, but this time, when I stepped through it, he said my name. I turned around. He looked at me for a moment. He was the kind of man who had never learned to say the important things, and had spent 63 years hoping the unimportant things would add up to the same total. I could see that he knew this about himself. I could see that he was not sure it was fixable. I could also see that he was, for the first time that I could recall, not pretending otherwise. Drive safe, he said. It was not enough. It was also something. I will, I said. The porch light came on as I walked to my car. Automatic sensor. It had always done that, triggered by motion, indifferent to context, just a light doing its job in the dark. I'd grown up watching it blink on every time someone came or went, and I had never until this moment thought about the fact that it couldn't tell the difference between arriving and leaving. I put my bag in the back seat, got in, sat for a moment with the door still open, the November air coming in, cold and carrying the particular smell of West Asheville and fall wood smoke from somewhere nearby, something composting in a neighbor's yard, the faint mineral edge that comes off the mountains when the temperature drops. The house looked the same as it had when I arrived 4 hours ago. Same green shutters, same white railing. The magnolia in the side yard was just a shape now in the dark, large and still. The curtain in the front window moved, then was still. I closed the car door, started the engine, backed out of the driveway and onto Westwood Drive and did not look in the rearview mirror. Not because I was being dramatic about it, just because there was nothing back there I needed to see that I hadn't already seen. I-26 East was quiet at 9 in the evening, the mountains closing in on both sides as I moved through the first part of the drive, and then gradually releasing as the elevation dropped and the landscape opened back up into Piedmont. I'd driven this road so many times in my life that my hands knew it without consultation when to ease into the curve, when the lane narrowed, where the overhead lights went dark for a long stretch, and you drove by headlights alone. I thought about what my mother had said. I noticed. I believed her. That was the thing I hadn't been sure of until she said it, and then I was sure she had noticed. She had cataloged everything I gave and everything I did and everything I didn't do the same way I had, because we were the same in that specific and inconvenient way we both kept records. We were both precise. We both understood that the numbers meant something. The difference was what we thought the numbers were for. She thought they were leverage. I had thought for a long time that if I ran a large enough surplus, something would happen, some moment of recognition, some acknowledgement that the account had been paid in full, that I was no longer in arrears for the crime of having been born into a family that had needed more than I'd had to give. I had been wrong about that. There was no surplus large enough. I understood that now in the way you understand things that you've technically known for years, but haven't let yourself sit with fully, without flinching. That was what the parking lot in Black Mountain had been about, I thought. Not strategy, not preparation, just sitting with the thing long enough to actually feel the shape of it. I passed the Black Mountain exit without stopping. The Walmart was visible from the highway, lit up and busy even at this hour, its parking lot full of ordinary Saturday evening. I looked at it as I passed and felt something small and specific, not quite relief, not quite anything that had a clean name. The particular sensation of having done something you were not sure you could do, and having done it, and being on the other side of it. My phone rang through the car speakers. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. "Are you driving?" she said. "Almost home. How was it?" I thought about how to answer that. How was it? The pot roast, which was good. The apron. The folder sliding across the table. My mother's hands on the counter. My father's voice saying I heard her say no in the tone of a man delivering a verdict about himself that he'd postponed for 18 years. Being seen, the porch light coming on as I walked to the car, indifferent, doing its job. It was what it was, I said. Priya was quiet for a moment. She was good at that, at letting silence be silence instead of rushing to fill it, which was one of the things I'd come to value about her over 6 years of shared coffee and adjacent desks. "Did it help?" she said. I considered the question the way I'd been taught to consider questions, without rushing toward the comfortable answer, waiting for the honest one. "Ask me in a month," I said. She laughed. "Okay, get home safe." "I will." I drove the last 40 minutes in quiet. The city appeared in the distance the way it always did, gradually. And then suddenly, the lights multiplying as I came down the grade into Charlotte, the skyline assembling itself out of the dark. 14th floor, corner unit. The apartment I had designed around a particular quality of silence. I parked in the garage and rode the elevator up, unlocked the door, turned on the light over the kitchen counter, just that one, not the overhead, which was too bright after a long day. I sat at my desk. The laptop was where I'd left it, closed. I opened it. 2 windows, the Heller audit, finished, filed on Friday. And the ledger, still open where I'd left it, the total in the bottom cell waiting. I looked at it for a moment. Then I scrolled to the bottom past the 47 pages, past the line items and the citations and the footnotes and the paragraph I had rewritten 11 times to a row I had added 3 weeks ago and had not quite understood when I added it. Row 48. The last row. Cost of never being seen. Incalculable. Listed here as $0 because some things cannot be invoiced. I read it twice. Then I closed the ledger, moved it out of the archive folder, and saved it to the desktop where I could see it. Not because I needed it anymore, because it had taken 11 months to build and it was mine and it deserved to be somewhere I didn't have to go looking for it. I made a cup of tea. Stood at the window. The city was doing its late Saturday thing, still moving, never fully stopped. All those lit windows full of people and their ordinary lives and their own private sets of numbers that only they knew how to read. Priya had said you couldn't put a number on family. She was right. She had been right the first time, and I had known it even then, and I had done it anyway, because some truths you have to arrive at by going through them, rather than around them. Because sometimes the only way to prove that something can't be counted is to count it, all the way to the end, until you're sitting at a desk at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night with the final total in front of you and the knowledge that the number was never really the point. The point was the 47 pages. The point was the drive up the mountain and the drive back down. The point was my father's voice, saying something true for the first time in 32 years, and my mother's hands, and the folder I left on the table because I didn't need it anymore. I drank my tea. I rinsed the mug. I went to bed. For the first time in 11 months, I did not open the ledger before I slept. I didn't need to. The account was closed. Here is what Rachel learned, and what maybe you already know but haven't let yourself say out loud yet. Love that comes with a bill attached was never really love. It was a transaction dressed up in the language of family. And you cannot pay your way into being seen by someone who has decided not to look. If you have spent years sending money, making calls you didn't want to make, showing up out of obligation rather than choice, you are not a bad child. You are someone who kept hoping that enough would finally be enough. It never is. The account was always going to be overdrawn on their terms, because some people need you in debt to keep you close. The real question isn't whether you owe them. It's whether you've been so busy paying that you forgot to ask what you're owed in return.